Many unhealthy behaviours are attempts at avoiding consequences. What if blame, lying, defensiveness, perfectionism, avoidances are all different strategies for escaping consequences? There is a question that has fascinated me for a very long time. Why do people lie? Why do people blame? Why do people become defensive? Why do people avoid difficult conversations? Why do people become perfectionists? Why do people procrastinate? Why do people struggle to take responsibility? At a glance, these all look like different problems, right? For a long time, I thought all of these were complete different problems. But the more I reflected on them, the more I started to notice a pattern. What if they are all different expressions of the same fear? What if underneath all of them is a fear of consequence? What if blame, lying, defensiveness, perfectionism, avoidance are all different strategies for escaping consequence? Think about it. Why do people lie? Usually, it's because they are afraid of what will happen if the truth is known. Why do people blame? Usually, it's because they are afraid of what will happen if responsibility falls on them. Why do people become defensive? Usually, it's because people are afraid what will happen if they admit wrong. Why do people avoid difficult conversations? Usually, it's because they're afraid of conflict, disapproval, rejection, and discomfort. Why do people procrastinate? It's usually they're afraid of failure, criticism, or discovering that they are not as capable as they would hope to be. Different behaviors, same fear, fear of consequences. Now, when I say consequences, I don't just mean practical consequences. I also mean emotional consequences. Embarrassment, shame, rejection, judgment, disapproval, humiliation. Many of us are actually not afraid of the event itself. We are afraid of how the event will make us feel. And I think this fear begins much earlier than we realize. As children, we are constantly learning what consequences mean. We make mistakes, we spill things, we forget things, we break things, we disappoint people. And the people around us teaches us what happens next. Some children learn, that's okay, let's clean it up. Some children learn, let's figure out what happened. Some children learn, mistakes are part of learning. But other children learn something very different. They learn being wrong is dangerous. Mistakes leads to anger. Mistakes leads to criticism. Mistakes leads to humiliation. Mistakes leads to losing love. And if that becomes your experience, then consequences stop being teachers. They become threats. And once consequences become threats, the mind starts building defenses. Blame becomes a defense. Lying becomes a defense. Defensiveness becomes a defense. Avoidance becomes a defense. Perfectionism becomes a defense. People-pleasing becomes a defense. At first glance, these behaviors look completely different. But underneath, they're all trying to accomplish the same thing. They are trying to protect us from consequences. Think about perfectionism. Many perfectionists believe that they are striving for excellence. But often, what they're striving for is safety. If everything is perfect, maybe nobody will criticize me. If everything is perfect, then finally I won't fail. If everything is perfect, maybe I won't experience uncomfortable consequences. The perfectionism isn't about perfection. It's about fear. And the same thing happens with people-pleasing. Many people-pleasers are not simply kind. Many are terrified. Terrified of disappointing people, terrified of upsetting people, terrified of conflict, terrified of rejection. So they sacrifice themselves in order to avoid these consequences. Again, different behavior, same fear. And perhaps nowhere is this more obvious than blame. When people blame others, we often assume that they are trying to avoid responsibility. And sometimes they are, but often they are trying to avoid consequences. Because if responsibility falls on someone else, then maybe they can avoid the discomfort. Perhaps they can escape shame. Perhaps they can escape judgment. Perhaps they can escape pain. The mind is always looking for escape routes. What fascinates me is that most of these strategies don't actually solve the problem. They simply postpone it. The lie delays the consequence. The blame delays the consequence. The avoidance delays the consequence. The defensiveness delays the consequence. And eventually, reality catches up. And now we have two problems: the original problem and the cost of avoiding it. This is why avoidance often creates suffering, not because consequences disappear, but because they accumulate. A difficult conversation avoided today becomes a bigger conversation later. A small mistake ignored today often becomes a larger problem later. A truth hidden today often becomes a larger truth hidden later. The consequence we fear grows while we are running away from it. And I think this is one of the greatest tragedies of fear. The thing we are doing to protect ourselves are often creating the suffering that we hope to avoid. Now, I want to be clear. Fear of consequence is so human. Every one of us experiences it. I experience it. You experience it. We all do. So the goal is to not eliminate fear of consequence, is to understand it. Because once we understand it, we begin to see our behaviors differently. Instead of asking, why am I so defensive? We ask, what consequence am I afraid of? Instead of asking, why do I keep avoiding this? We ask, what consequence am I trying to escape from? Instead of asking, why do I struggle to tell the truth? We ask, what consequence feels unbearable to me? These questions often reveal far more than judgment ever could. And perhaps the most important realization is this: many of the behaviors we dislike in ourselves are not signs that we're broken. They are signs that we are afraid. Fear is often hidden underneath them. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of shame, fear of consequences. And once we begin to see the fear underneath the behavior, something changes. We become more curious, more compassionate, more aware. And awareness is where change begins. Because the moment we can see the patterns, we are no longer completely controlled by it. We can start making different choices. We can start facing things we previously avoided. We can start telling truth we previously hid. We can start taking responsibility where we previously blamed. Not because fear disappears, but because understanding gives us a choice. And that leads to a deeper question. If so much of our suffering comes from fearing consequences, what would happen if we develop a healthier relationship with consequences instead? What would happen if consequences start being enemies instead? What would happen if they become teachers? Because I think the answer to that question changes everything. And I'll answer that in the next video. So this was the third video of the 4-part series. I also would love to know what resonated with you in this video. I love to read about it. So, thank you for watching, and I shall see you very, very soon.